All right. So welcome, folks. One thing for, we are going to want handheld mics out here, one or two or whatever we got. And I want this to be a discussion, okay? So we got a few things that we want to do as far as rolling our versioning forward and improving some of our code hygiene. And so that's what the discussion is on today. Again, I want this to be very interactive. First thing I want to talk about, just go ahead and put it in the center table, because these two guys are probably going to be talking a lot. So, again, kind of back to the reasoning. So, first topic I want to cover is third-party dependencies. We got a variety of dependencies that are getting kind of long in the tooth. They've been around for a while. We need to roll them forward. When we do that and we roll them forward, it gives us a variety of benefits. One of them is it improves our lack of any issues that may come up regarding vulnerabilities. It also, in some cases, actually moves the modules from a less permissive license to a more permissive license for us. This happens particularly with a variety of JBoss components, because their later versions are under LGPL, their newer versions are under Apache. And that just makes our life easier. So that's another reason to move forward. And in a couple of cases, we actually are missing some source code for our dependencies. And so if there were issues that were to come up with those, we'd actually have a hard time making any modifications to them to make it better. So in general, and this will be the first time that we're doing this, so we want to actually come up with a process to be able to do this and then be able to continue to do it over time as we move forward with releases into the future. All right, so what I want to discuss here today is how we go about doing that. I'm expecting that whoever it is that walks into this room is interested in this topic, and therefore I can try to recruit them in helping us do this. That's really my plan and the lure that is getting you folks in here. Now, the logistics of rolling these libraries forward is something that we have to take care in implementing. The problem is we're going to break stuff, right? When we roll these third-party dependencies forward, we know we're going to break stuff. If we try to do it all at once, lots of stuff's going to break, and because so many things changed all at once, we're not going to know what it is, so it's going to be a real pain to fix. If we try to do it one at a time, it will take us forever, and there's actually interdependencies across those third-party bundles, and so that would also be a problem. So the first thing that I want this group to talk about, and this is the most important issue for me, is rolling these libraries forward, is what is the right way to do that? What's the right granularity? How do we figure out what the right granularity is for identifying the third-party components that we're going to move together? Figuring out what we need to do from a communication standpoint on telling everybody, hey, we're about to break everything. So feel free to help us fix it. As well as how to actually, do everything we can to make it easy for these projects to roll forward, touching their PALM files, updating those versions, and so forth. So that's really the first and the meat of this conversation that's going to be going on here. So if you happen to be in this room and none of that sounded interesting whatsoever, you will not make me feel bad if you choose to leave. But if you stay, that's what we're going to be talking about. I know that, again, working with Andy and Ton, I've actually brought this up to them prior. And given that they are knee-deep into the continuous integration system, I expect they might have some thoughts on this. So with that, I will ask them to impart to us what those thoughts might be.
You can start. I have no way to start on that.
I'll start off by turning on the mic. Then you put it to your face.
Oh.
Okay.
It's on.
It's on. He's good. It's on. It's on.
Yeah. Where do we want to start on?
Okay, so if you, seriously.
So we've got a couple different things that we need to worry about here. We've got the dependencies that we have that are coming from Central that we can actually upgrade to pretty much directly. And I understand that we can actually take a look in CLM and see where we're behind on. Those are some of the things that are the easiest to actually for us to upgrade. And I know that there's a few things in there that we need to upgrade to newer versions because of either security patches or they're just, about 10 years old.
Yeah.
The other components that we need to worry about, though, are all the third-party ones that we are essentially self-hosting. And we've got problems with a lot of those because we don't have source jars. And this causes problems for our export controls.
Actually, it doesn't cause any problem for export controls.
Doesn't?
The ones that we need for export controls, we actually have.
We actually managed to fix all that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, and again, having source is one of the reasons we're rolling forward. Again, vulnerabilities is another, licenses is another, and just as a general good practice for an open source project, we should not lag a decade behind on our third-party dependencies. So, Ton, thoughts?
Yeah, for me, I think one of the biggest ones is the Eclipse ones, because I think someone picked really old Eclipse dependencies because someone pushed it to Maven Central a long time ago. Over 10 years ago. And Eclipse obviously has had numerous releases since. And I think in this situation, Eclipse actually doesn't release anything to Maven Central, so there's no way we can get official support for that. But what we can do is figure out which ones we use and then import into our third-party repositories and then have all the projects point to that instead of pointing to this random jar that a mystery person put on Maven Central.
Right. So again, a key question for me is how do we decide how we identify what groups of third-party dependencies we want to roll forward at a given time? So meaning that, again, we're going to break things, we want to minimize the number of things we break, and we want to chunk those up into reasonable components. I don't know if we do this 4 different times, we break the number of dependencies up into 4 different groups, or if it's 8 groups, or if it's 3 groups, or what. But that would be, and I guess I'm asking this audience here, if the answer to that question isn't obvious to anybody in the room, I'd like proposals on how we actually get to that answer. Who is it we do need to bring into the room to get that answer?
I think it's getting like PTLs talking about it. And especially the projects that are using these dependencies, right?
Well, everybody's using lots of dependencies.
Yeah, but in some cases there are projects who they're the only ones using our dependency, so they'd know best how to fix whatever it breaks when they upgrade.
Okay, and yeah, agreed that it's a relatively easy case to work with a project for the dependencies that they are the sole object that has that dependencies. The more interesting one, and the one that I want to discuss today, is where we have cross-project, where we have multiple projects with the same dependencies, because those are the ones we're going to want to move forward in lockstep, I would assume. And again, I'm happy to hear alternative thoughts on that.
So this is stuff I did in my, parts of the stuff I did in my previous job. And so the way we ran things like that, well, it seems to me in ODL we're, one of the things that makes upgrading upstream dependencies very complicated is the fact that we're all running on Snapshot all the time in our development process. So we can't, so the way normally I would go about doing something like that would be to upgrade all the versions in ODL parent and release a new version of ODL parent, and then downstream projects can upgrade to the new version of ODL parent when they're ready to do so. But that doesn't work for dependencies that become level 1 and level 2 dependencies because you're going through some other ODL project as well. So you need to upgrade everything in lockstep then. And you can't do that currently because your dependencies on the other ODL projects are all snapshots. So I'm making a case for, yes, either that or independent life cycles for the various projects, or a monolithic project, but I've been told that's and as far as splitting things up goes, that generally needs either somebody who goes and studies in detail the upgrades in the upstream projects, say for instance Spring Framework, because like when you change versions of that, it's going to pull in a whole bunch of other things. You're going to end up upgrading Jackson at the same time.
Yep.
And anything related to that. So that needs to go in one shot. And in a project like ODL, you end up just upgrading everything in one go. You can't really split things.
Okay, so your advice would actually
bang.
just to bite the bullet.
Yeah, except, well, yeah, even though it's going to be really painful, the alternatives are also painful in my experience.
Right. Not doing it as a single upgrade introduces as many bad variables as doing it because of you not really knowing where the dependency, transitive dependency is going.
If you split it up, you're telling people we're doing this so that it's easier for you to upgrade, except it's probably not going to be easier. Whereas if we just say we bite the bullet and do everything in one shot, we know it's going to be a pain point for everybody at that point, but at least everybody knows it's going to be difficult.
Yep.
It sounds almost like
Yeah.
kind of like we would want to schedule this as like a bug bash week. We're going to a bug bash week. We're going to upgrade the world and everybody has to go fix bugs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, no new code, just fix bugs.
Yeah, I mean, this is a piece of technical debt we need to clean up, right? And so in that sense, that is quite true.
So I think another thing that we should do going forward is, like right now when a project wants a third-party dependency, they kind of just use it.
Mm-hmm.
What like Eclipse does is they announce what to use, right? So like the next release, someone will say, well, we're going to use this version of this dependency. All projects who depend on it should switch to this version, rather than just all these projects just randomly deciding by themselves, I'm just going to use whatever,
Yep.
and just adding it and not announcing it to anyone.
Yeah, and Colin was telling me that his intern just created a script that actually walks through all the POM files and identifies the version skew across the same components.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool feature. I've seen it myself.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, and that can be helpful for us as well. So if we were to do this and we were to, again, introduce this to the community and have a bug bash week, do we still have an issue with snapshot and where things are pulled? Or, I mean, if we pull from Palm Parent and get that lined up with, and we arbitrarily say we're going to go with whatever the latest revision is of all of our third-party dependencies. And then we're going to see what breaks from there.
Well, snapshots are only an issue with open daylight projects, because all the third-party projects, we're not using snapshots. We're using released libraries of third-party.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, but again, I'm just looking, so what would be what we tell the community as we introduce this? There isn't any issues with snapshots. We're going to say, you know, is this a matter of, again, how brazen is it to create a Palm Parent that has the latest revisions of all of our third-party dependencies? And then say, please push this on next Monday and let's have a bug bash week.
Right.
Is that what I'm hearing? Am I understanding the steps here?
The only thing that I see as a problem with that is the way we've got our dependency graph already. Because if we announce a bug bash week and there are bugs that the controller has that they don't get fixed and other downstream projects are trying to work on their bugs, if they can't build because the controller is still busted, it causes problems. So it may take more than a week just to do this.
Yeah. But you're right. I mean, we'd actually, or I think what I'm hearing you say is we would want to keep a timeline associated with offsets. You know, in essence, roll forward, tell offset 1 and offset 2 projects, please begin to work on your stuff, but if you have issues, recognize your life will become much more stable after the offset 0 projects have gone through and cleaned up all of their dependencies.
Right, and we would want to make sure that the offset 0, offset 1 projects don't start working on new code after they've fixed their bugs.
Now, is there a way for us creating a branch so that the offset 0 guys can go off and fix all
We
of these
could do a
dependencies?
branch.
So that everybody keeps working on all their past stuff, everything's going fine. The offset 0 guys take a break, go bash their bugs, bring that branch to master, and then offset 1 starts to work. While offset 2 continues to work on all the old stuff, they're still making progress. And offset 1 goes and does a bug bash. Is that a reasonable forward? I'm getting nodding, so this sounds like it is plausible, but yeah, come tell me where the problems are.
So the problems with that, again, it comes back to all the snapshot stuff, because you can pull a branch. See, imagine you pull we do the work in ODL parent in a branch, and then we can tell level 0 projects, try building your projects with ODL parent from this branch, but they have to rebuild ODL parent locally. They can't take it from Nexus, and they can never push it to you can't push ODL parent to Nexus then because of the snapshot thing. Yep. And then level 0, they finish their work, and then we're stuck because for level 1s to be able to use that in a scalable way, we can't tell level 1 to rebuild ODL parent and level 0 from branches locally. At this point, we need to push something to Nexus, and then because of the snapshots, everybody suddenly has to switch. You see what I mean? Well, because if we didn't have, if we had auto releases, or if we had continuous releases, we'd be able to say level ones now you fix your POMs and you stick to this particular, whatever release you're currently using of level 0s, you stick to that. And then level 0s, they can do their work, so they'll have new releases, but none of the downstreams will be affected. And then it just trickles down. Once the level 0s are ready, level 1s, they change the release of level 0s they're using and fix their bugs, create a new release for the level 2s, etc.
We could create another repository in Nexus. That would also work, and we could start changing up the settings files on the Jenkins systems. So we could keep everybody pointed at the current staging or snapshot repository,
Right.
and just the level 0 releases, we would point them to the new
New one, right.
new one, and then as each milestone moved, we would change theirs as well. That would be an option. And then once everybody was basically updated, we could switch back to the standard snapshot repository.
You could push them back all to our.
I could
we
remerge
roll
them.
everybody forward, or
Yeah, we could remerge them then.
okay, all right.
Or keep the two around for a while so that you can still maintain stable lithium and stuff like that.
Oh, so stable lithium will end up is on a different version number, so it wouldn't be a problem.
Okay, yeah, that was actually going to be one of my next questions. Was does this muck anything up with lithium or helium? Okay.
Which drops? The jobs. No, well, all the Jenkins settings, or all the Maven settings files are managed via Jenkins. So it would just be a matter of, and currently they're all tied to a single global settings file, and each project has their own project dedicated file. So we can muck around per project.
Hey, Neela. Okay. All right, that actually sounds like we're close to a plan. Other problems? Other issues that you see there? Okay. Work on the continuous integration. How long to create a repo? Any other issues or increased workload or something that would scare you guys as far as keeping up with existing stuff while this was going on?
So I was talking to Tan about this. Actually, this was a few weeks back, and I could totally be wrong, but as not just version skew, but sometimes the projects have changed like the name of the dependency in a minor extent if it was merged with another
But
project.
this will happen, right? As we move forward in those third-party dependencies, some of those names of those third-party dependencies have changed, I believe.
Right. There's newer versions, but they don't exactly have the same name. So just updating it to the latest version of that name may not necessarily be the most current version of that. Is that not correct? Right.
Yep.
It used to be a certain project and then another.
Yeah, use the mic, Tom, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I was just saying, if a project renamed, it's either its artifact ID or even the group ID. So if they were like an independent project before and they merged with another project and suddenly their group ID is different, so the routing for how to get that artifact will change.
Right, no, and that's a good point. So as we're planning to roll this out, what's the right advice that we give to projects in finding, or who, let me start there. Who is going to go out and find the most recent version of these third parties? Who's the right group of people to do that? And obviously we give them the advice that we're looking to roll truly to the latest version available of that dependency, even in the case where they've changed group name.
In my opinion, it should be the developers who are working on it, because they might pick a particular version of a software because it has a certain API they want to use. Someone like me who's not deeply involved in the particular project wouldn't know what APIs they need or whatever. And if you just bump them to the absolute latest, it might have they might have removed a deprecated API that they were depending on before.
Right, fair enough. And so, and given the way we're talking about doing it, it means if you're a developer in an offset 1 project, you get or an offset 0 project, you get first choice.
Yeah.
Is what that means. And actually, I like the way that starts because it's a small group of pretty skilled individuals in the offset zeros, and that will and also they pull in they pull in an awful lot of dependencies that everybody else drags along. So that's actually going to be it's an 80-20 thing, I think. I think we're going to catch 80% of the dependencies just in offset 0.
Yeah, I tend to agree, because a lot of the offset 2 projects are actually just pulling in things because that's what the how-to says to do, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's from doing the CLM scans, that's definitely the sense that I get.
So there might be a better way to do it, but since there isn't really a programmatic way to, because we can't just run the script that you guys referenced earlier to upgrade them all, because there might be a artifact or a group ID change, would it be a good idea to build like a spreadsheet or something like that, dump all of these dependencies in there, and then next column over what we're going to upgrade it to, and share that with the entire community? So not only are we making sure somebody else is going back and making sure that, yeah, we're updating to the right version, but then transparency, even the people that aren't starting on that dependency bug bash get a chance to go, oh, I already have an idea what may break, or I may.
And I actually don't know that that's necessary, because I'm envisioning this, that we're pretty much going to go to Tony and Robert and say, please upgrade your third-party dependencies, and they're going to be doing that in their POM file. And that POM file is going to contain the versions that they choose to go forward to, and they're the right people to choose which versions to go forward to. And from that, we could generate a spreadsheet that we could share with everybody else, but it's all going to be in the POM file because that's what they're going to use to upgrade.
What about transparency to the people that may be, lower level project, or like offset 1 or offset 2, so they get visibility of what's going to happen before it actually happens? Or is that?
Well, and if they have some really strong reason why they can't go to a different version, then they can't go to the version that the offset zeros are going to, then that would be the decision that they would have to make at that time.
Okay.
Right? That would be what we would try to advocate against. But if there is a logical reason, which wouldn't make sense because typically those offset 1s and offset 2s are going to be relying and currently rely on the versions of those third-party dependencies that are used by offset 0, i.e. meaning if an offset 0 needs it, that's what's getting picked up in the offset 1s and 2s. Okay, shoot holes in my logic now. No, no, which is all good. Please, then don't take that badly.
So right, if a level 0 project moves up to a dependency, and say for instance it's Guava and it's deprecated a bunch of stuff that some other project needs for whatever reason, or it's something like HTTP client, I think as well, where they maintain 2 different APIs and there's a version 3 that's maintained and a version 4 that are maintained. So in some cases you can use they've got different artifact IDs, so you can have dependencies on both, and that works. And you can also always override, unless we put in Maven Enforcer, you can always override in a downstream project the version that you're going to use. And because we're using OSGI bundles, that's okay, because you start Karaf and you'll end up with your level 0 bundle with its version of a jar. And and as long as there's no serialization, well, in some cases it can be promised, but not in most. So I don't think there should be too many issues with level 0s saying we need this, and other projects saying, oh, this is going to break us and we can't do anything about it. This is awful.
Yeah, and if I were going to bet dollars to donuts, I would expect we have more of that version skew now than we will in the end, because the offset 0 has used such old crufty stuff. That it
because
very
they
often
were the first, so they did their pumps first, so they've got the oldest stuff. But as far as using, so it seems to me like if it's not, I don't know if it's being used already in the project, but it could be useful to use Maven Enforcer and stuff like that as well, to to handle the artifact and group ID changes and force projects to move up, because you can fail builds if you say, for instance, like JUnit changed. So you can fail the build if a project is still using the old group ID. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can do to help things along. And because we're using OSGI, there isn't anything really that should be a blocker, I don't think.
Right, right. And Ton, are you familiar with those tools, and do you have an opinion on our use of those, or advocating the use of those going forward once we get through this?
Yes, I'm reasonably familiar with the Enforcer plugin. We currently use it to lock the Maven version. So like you have to use at minimum Maven 3.1.1.
Okay. Hold the mic a little bit closer. I'm actually having a hard time hearing you.
Sorry. I haven't used it in the context of enforcing group IDs, etc. though. So I'm not too familiar how that will work. And the convergence plugin, I've seen a few projects use that. But I think that one's a little harder to force, because there's a few third-party dependencies that depend additionally on other third-party dependencies, and we can't get those to line up because it's not our project, right?
Right, of course.
So if I may make a suggestion, I think that there are a lot of offset 1, offset 2 projects that they may be listing such dependencies in their POM files that, well, they actually depend on, but they also depend on something that already depends on them. So if this script that is creating the list of version skews could detect those dependencies listed in a POM file that are not absolutely necessary to be there, and suggest to those projects to remove them unless they really, really need to have that dependency in the POM file, that could simplify a lot of things, because you don't have to actually look at those. When we bump versions, those versions are not bumped because they are dependencies, not open daylight dependencies. So this could reduce the number of places where we introduce version skew, I think. So, for example, if I'm a offset 2 project, I shouldn't list Guava as my dependency, because I probably depend on something that already pulls in the right Guava version, unless I have a specific need for that.
So that's a common thing that's recommended, but it's actually a bad idea. Because what you really want is, so you're right in that most projects have Maven dependencies that they don't need, and there are tools that will help you identify those and remove them. But if a project has code that uses Guava, then it should list Guava as a dependency. And not rely on getting Guava as a transitive dependency, because if whatever it's using to get Guava as a transitive dependency someday decides no longer to use Guava, the build will break. So Guava is unlikely, but it can happen for other things. What you can do is enforce centralize the versions that are used by moving them up into dependency management. That way, your downstream projects, they still have to say that they're using Guava, ideally, but they get the version that's specified in the parent POM, wherever that is. And that way you can control the versions you're using, but you still get real dependency graphs and not just accidental stuff.
Yeah, actually, so you should, so I agree with that. And but you should still be able to detect if they explicitly specify a version in the dependency, so not in the dependency management, and maybe unknowingly. So if they really need it, okay. But if they, for whatever reason, copy pasting or whatever, they just put there the version. Well, Eclipse will probably warn you that you're overwriting, but I don't know if we could periodically check for that and notify them to remove that version. That might help.
You just left holding the mic in the middle, Ton? Is that it? All right, cool. I think we actually have the makings of a plan there.
The one thought that occurs to me is that as we start moving projects through this process, we have to consider how our full integration test suites operate, because right now they're obviously looking at the current snapshot sets. We are going to end up with a split view of things. I'm not certain how we can actually keep doing our integration tests during this bug bash, essentially.
Right. And, well, yeah, and we need those integration tests to actually validate that that we're done with our bugs. So, Andy, if you don't mind, elaborate a little more on that. Talk a little more about what's not going to work in the new repository.
Well, I suppose it would be possible if we were to essentially create another set of integration tests that were specifically bug bash tests for use during the bug bash. The problem that we have is that the user level settings for Maven is tied to essentially a single user, and so the integration user would have one set of settings. We would have to essentially have new settings directives for that, which would essentially force us to have a duplicate set of tests.
Yeah.
You know,
and for a short period, again, this is a scoped exercise.
yeah. So
not
it would be
totally
possible. We just have to think about it carefully. Are you gonna move over here and you want that?
Yes, please. You can use profiles for that. You can have a setting. You can specify. There are two things you can do. In the settings file, you can point to a different artifact repository in a profile, and then give a different build profile in Jenkins job. And there are some things, I don't know how far you can go, but you can specify artifact repositories in POMs as well.
That would probably resolve the issue, honestly. I wasn't thinking about that. Thank you.
Okay, and you do realize you've volunteered for this effort as we're doing this too, right? You're not getting away now. I'm just warning you. Okay, good. Okay, good. So we're back to having a plan. Cool. I'm going to work with Ton and Andy, and I'm sorry that I do not remember your name, Stephen. I will work with you guys to actually build this plan. And we'll introduce it at an upcoming TSC meeting, okay, and see if we can get some dates and scope around when we try to launch this. All right. Any other comments, questions on that particular topic before we move on? Yeah.
Just how we go about maintaining this in the future, as far as enforcement for making sure that the dependencies regularly are updated in the future, and that doesn't slip again.
Yeah, and we've touched upon that a little bit here. Anybody got a best practice from other projects, other Java projects, like maybe the Eclipse
Well,
Foundation?
I was just thinking maybe it's just something we do at the beginning of every release cycle, right?
Yeah,
That's the most logical time. That's when you can disrupt projects the most, and you're also kind of committing on we will use this version of whatever for this release.
Yeah, that would be what have logically come to mind. So
Yeah. So
that sounds
maybe it's just like a checklist, right? Like this every release we're gonna do this action item.
yep.
Yeah.
We would have to fold in security updates during the release cycle somehow.
And well, there was a session with David Drum did a session on the security stuff as well yesterday, the day before, I can't remember.
Yeah, I didn't get the chance to go to that.
So there are two things there. It's nice to do it at the beginning of a release cycle because then you can get all your metrics down to 0, which helps people then do whatever's necessary afterwards because they're not sitting there with a CLM report with 80 things in red. But I think during the release cycle, you still want to keep track of things so that you can do minor version upgrades and get upstream bug fixes with little risk. And all the time in ODL, we'll need to keep an eye on security issues and upstreams because there are vulnerabilities that can affect us, and then you're in the security response procedures and not.
Right. Right. Okay. Anything else or any other comments on that with keeping up to date? And yeah, we also need to, again, propose something. That's actually one we should probably circle back with David as well, if we're going to bake this into whatever our constant plans are, and get his input. Cool. Any other thoughts on that particular topic?
The only other consideration that I have is since we do have the CLM reports coming out weekly, I think it is, should we start at some point requiring that at the end of the release cycle that they have essentially a passing grade out of CLM?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
as it stands right now, nobody does.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
One project, I think.
Yeah. Well, and also the policy rules that are currently sitting there are not particularly tuned.
Right. We really should get those fixed
we'll need
too.
to tune them. Yeah. I've actually that's one of the questions I have out to Sonotype is more information so that we're actually able to do a better job of a policy for our project. So yes, that will also be getting better in Beryllium. I think it's a good thing to aspire to for this release to have everybody at a passing grade. I'm not quite sure we'll get there, but I think it's something we should shoot to. Again, between adopting the policy correctly as well as getting everybody up to date with it. Very good. The other topics that I had in this session, well, again, I'm going to ask again because every time I do, I seem to get one more comment. So again, any other comments or questions on the plan we have here for rolling third-party dependencies forward? Okay. So ensuring all appropriate files have proper copyright and licenses and headers. This is something that I go through every now and then and call out and touch projects. Again, I will note to the TSC that we'll be doing that early in this cycle to let everybody know. There is a bug in Fossology that we've been impacted by, and that is, well, the issue is you can put an Eclipse header up on a file, and if you say Eclipse license and not Eclipse public license, Fossology either detects it as an unrecognized license or as no license at all. And I discovered that because such a header has propagated across a couple, 3 different projects. And I have a whole bunch of files that it says there's no license header, and then I go in and look, and indeed there's a perfectly good license header that's sitting there. except it says Eclipse license instead of Eclipse public license. So for this, I believe it's the best just to do a workaround and go in and touch all those files and add the word public between the words Eclipse and license.
So we actually already have code that gives you a warning if your file's missing the header. And the thing with code, though, is it has to be exact, right? Like, if their header deviates even a tiny bit, it'll think it's wrong.
Right. Well, that's your script. Fossology isn't supposed to do that. Fossology is supposed to be orders of magnitude smarter than that.
What's good about the script is it can actually fail the project if the header's missing. So the key thing is getting all the projects to use the same header. And then we run this script, and if their build fails in the future, or if in the future they put a new file in but they forgot the header, it will fail their build, which is something we can keep enforced.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
like I said, the key thing is we have to spend some time getting all the projects to have the same header format.
So there's no regex capability in that detection, because people do copyrighted by right next to the license line, and copyrighted by obviously changes.
So it has wildcard lines, right? So the copyright parts don't matter because we can tell it to skip those lines. But the core text part, it'll say like this is the Eclipse public license, wherever. It has to have the same amount of lines. The text has to be in the same spot. However, the variable spots where the lines are saying like copyright by this company.
Okay. So you can do some level of templating too.
Yes.
When is that script being run? Is it during the CLM jobs, or?
It's a check style script. So it's part of the code style thing.
Yeah, and you're putting out warnings now, right?
Right now it's just warning you. It's not enforcing, but we can flip the switch to say you have to have this passing, or otherwise your build will fail.
Right. Unlike at least Java files and stuff, header files, Java files. Okay. Yeah, and I'm not sure we'll ever get past warning. I'm not sure that it's not the right thing not to get past warnings.
The only other thing that I can think of that we might want to consider would be to create another weekly job that essentially checks out a project and then file by file throws it at Fossology.
I'm not sure we can actually script to Fossology. Well,
Fossology is all API.
Oh, I know. No, but it's not it's not evaluated as API. Somebody has to go read what Fossology outputs.
No. There's a single file API where you can upload something and it reports back, and it's anonymous. So you can actually throw a single file at Fossology and it will report back via.
Right. Okay, I know what you're talking about. Okay.
So it might be possible for us to write a job that would actually check something out and literally throw each file at Fossology.
Possibly. Okay. Good. Was there something specific, or are you guys waiting for the logging? Because
I think the docs thing is happening now, isn't it?
oh,
Are we running over?
We're late. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I had until half past. My bad.
No.
Extension of the docs meeting.
No. This was we just built out a plan on how to update all of our third-party dependencies, and that was really, really awesome discussion. I greatly appreciate Steven's input. Sir, your name? Laury. Jürgen? Or Laury. Oh, it's Laury. Okay, great. I've seen you so much as text. So excellent to put a face to a name. Very good. And Andy and Ton and all those people who suffered through this discussion with us. All right, so with that, we'll close here. We'll apparently Docs is going on right now. So I will be happy to relinquish the microphone. We are recording.
Okay.
We're going to break stuff, right? When we roll these third-party dependencies forward, we know we're going to break stuff. If we try to do it all at once, lots of stuff's going to break, and because so many things changed all at once, we're not going to know what it is, so it's going to be a real pain to fix. If we try to do it one at a time, it will take us forever, and there's actually interdependencies across those third-party bundles, and so that would also be a problem. So the first thing that I want this group to talk about, and this is the most important issue for me, is rolling these libraries forward, is what is the right way to do that? what's the right granularity? How do we figure out what the right granularity is for identifying the third-party components that we're going to move together? Figuring out what we need to do from a communication standpoint on telling everybody, hey, we're about to break everything. So feel free to help us fix it. As well as how to actually do everything we can to make it easy for these projects to roll forward, touching their PALM files, updating those versions, and so forth. So that's really the first and the meat of this conversation that's going to be going on here. So if you happen to be in this room,
Security patches, or they're just, about 10 years
Crufty.
old.
Yeah.
The other components that we need to worry about, though, are all the third-party ones that we are essentially self-hosting. And we've got problems with a lot of those because we don't have source jars. And this causes problems for our export controls.
Actually, it doesn't cause any problem for export controls.
Doesn't?
The ones that we need for export controls, we actually have.
We actually managed to fix all
So,
that.
yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah. And again, having source is one of the reasons we're rolling forward. Again, vulnerabilities is another, licenses is another. And just as a general good practice for an open source project, we should not lag a decade behind on our third-party dependencies. So, Ton, thoughts?
Yeah, for me, I think one of the biggest ones is the Eclipse ones. Because I think someone picked really old Eclipse dependencies because someone pushed it to Maven Central a long time ago, over 10 years ago. And Eclipse obviously has had numerous releases since. And I think in this situation, Eclipse actually doesn't release anything to Maven Central, so there's no way we can get official support for that. But what we can do is figure out which ones we use and then import into.
All right. So welcome, folks. One thing for, we are going to want handheld mics out here, one or two or whatever we got. And I want this to be a discussion, okay? So we got a few things that we want to do as far as rolling our versioning forward and improving some of our code hygiene. And so that's what the discussion is on today. Again, I want this to be very interactive. First thing I want to talk about, just go ahead and put it in the center table, because these two guys are probably going to be talking a lot. So, again, kind of back to the reasoning. So, first topic I want to cover is third-party dependencies. We got a variety of dependencies that are getting kind of long in the tooth. They've been around for a while. We need to roll them forward. When we do that and we roll them forward, it gives us a variety of benefits. One of them is it improves our lack of any issues that may come up regarding vulnerabilities. It also, in some cases, actually moves the modules from a less permissive license to a more permissive license for us. This happens particularly with a variety of JBoss components because their later versions are under LGPL, their newer versions are under Apache. And that just makes our life easier. So that's another reason to move forward. And in a couple of cases, we actually are missing some source code for our dependencies. And so if there were issues that were to come up with those, we'd actually have a hard time making any modifications to them to make it better. So in general, and this will be the first time that we're doing this, so we want to actually come up with a process to be able to do this and then be able to continue to do it over time as we move forward with releases into the future. All right, so what I want to discuss here today is how we go about doing that. I'm expecting that whoever it is that walks into this room is interested in this topic, and therefore I can try to recruit them in helping us do this. That's really my plan and the lure that is getting you folks in here. Now, the logistics of rolling these libraries forward is something that we have to take care in implementing. The problem is, and none of that sounded interesting whatsoever, you will not make me feel bad if you choose to leave. But if you stay, that's what we're going to be talking about. I know that, again, working with Andy and Ton, I've actually brought this up to them prior. And given that they are knee-deep into the continuous integration system, I expect they might have some thoughts on this. So with that, I will ask them to impart to us what those thoughts might be.
You can start.
I'll start off by turning on the mic. Then you put it to your face.
Oh,
Okay.
it's on.
No,
It's
he's
on.
good. It's on. It's on.
Where do we want to start on?
Okay, so if you, I mean, seriously.
So we've got a couple different things that we need to worry about here. We've got the dependencies that we have that are coming from central that we can actually upgrade to pretty much directly. And I understand that we can actually take a look in CLM and see where we're behind on. Those are some of the things that are the easiest to actually for us to upgrade. And I know that there's a few things in there that we need to upgrade to newer versions because of either security